Director for Diversity and Social Justice Education, and I'm very excited to be here with you all today, as well as our speakers from the GEO. And just one quick announcement that shows up in our slides beforehand, but you can also find this information on the DSJE website. But we have our Social Justice Awards ceremony coming up on the 16th from 4:30 to 6:30. It's a really fun time. We celebrate a lot of folks on campus, whether students, student organizations, or programs, and there's food, which is good food. So feel free to ask anyone on staff about those awards, but you are all invited and more than welcome to attend. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sydney.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney. I'm the Director of Student Leadership and Engagement here at the Y. Just have a couple of announcements to share with you. One being the Y's big fundraiser is coming up on April 18th. We do a dinner and auction at the iHotel. If that's something that you're interested in, you can RSVP by next Friday on our website. That helps support programs like Friday Forum, amongst many other things that we do here. Secondly, we are also hiring a grants and finance manager for our New American Welcome Center. So if you're looking for a new job, you should also go to our website and find more details out on that. And that's University YMCA.org. That's all I have, so I'm going to hand it over to Sang from DSJE.
Thank you. Hi everyone, it is my great pleasure to introduce the Graduate Employees Organization who is speaking today. So the GEO, it works to find common ground among all graduate employees, regardless of race, gender, religion, disability, sexual orientation, citizenship status, department, job category, or membership in the union. So the GEO is the unit that represents the graduate employees on our campus. So they strive to be inclusive and open to all graduate employees. They operate along democratic principles, act always in the best interest of graduate employees, and act responsibly towards the entire university community. So it is with great pleasure that they will be speaking here today about the very important work they do to advance social justice here on our campus and ensure that our grad students and employees who work here are able to live and work under good working conditions. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Emma, who will start the conversation. Thank you. Let's give a hand to Emma.
Thank you so much. Just as a quick introduction, hi, my name is Emma Walters. I'm a PhD student in urban and regional planning, and I'm a graduate teaching assistant and one of the co-chairs of the Solidarity Committee for GEO.
Hello, I'm Matthew Heinrichs. I am a PhD student in sociology. I am on the Solidarity Committee and also a member of the GEO bargaining team, so bargaining our next contract.
Hi everyone, I'm Leslie. I'm also a PhD student here, and I'm also a part of Solidarity Committee here at GEO.
Cool. And we're presenting today our presentation, Sindicatos, Labor Unions Protecting Graduate Workers and Standing in Solidarity. And we're doing this presentation because we are entering bargaining. And we're entering bargaining during a really precarious moment, specifically for our international non-citizen graduate workers. And we're here to present about the fact that unions can really be a last line of defense for workers, particularly for our more precarious or vulnerable laborers, like immigrants and non-citizens. So we'll do some talking about the history of labor movements. It's not always a pretty history, and specifically the ways that immigrants have played a crucial role in the United States in our labor movement of winning labor gains. And then talk a little bit about, in broad terms, because we can't speak in super detail, about the things that we're trying to win in our upcoming bargaining. But just as a reminder, we are here from GEO, or the Graduate Employees Organization, which is the labor union for graduate workers. And we represent teaching assistants, research assistants, administrative graduate assistants, and pre-professional graduate assistants. PGAs and RAs are our most recent add to bargaining unit, RA campaign being the most recent, which is really huge. We have thousands of workers in our bargaining unit, and it was a really big win. And like I mentioned, our current contract expires in August 2026. And so we are starting our bargaining negotiations in just a little bit over a week, which is really exciting. And so this is an opportunity for us to demand good wages, rights, and protections and benefits. And it is particularly important in this moment in U.S. political history. One thing that we'd like to mention is that we are a solidarity union. It's something that we're really quite proud of, and we're members of the Solidarity Committee. And the importance of the Solidarity Union perspective is that, we do a lot of working around what it means to connect struggles, right? That the labor struggle is inherently connected to other racial and social justice struggles, so like race, gender struggles across, not just in our country, but internationally. So we operate as a kind of really unique platform to connect and act on struggles that are happening locally, in the state, nationally, but also internationally. And we work specifically on building relationships with different movement organizations in order to enhance the strength of all of our campaigns. And we specifically within Solidarity Committee place a lot of importance on the idea of supporting our most precarious workers in the union. And having the solidarity and intersectional perspective specifically means that we can understand the very different and multifaceted ways that workers arrive to the workplace, and how that differentiates our own level of comfortability as an employee. So that's a little bit about our solidarity perspective as a union, which is quite important to what we'll talk about today. But before we get into it, since we're talking about unions, we figured some key terms might help us gain shared understanding.
All right, so what is a labor union? A labor union is a group of workers whose goal is to maintain or improve working conditions like GEO, right? And it's made up of several committees, such as, again, Solidarity Committee, and of course, amazing members. What is the bargaining unit? This is the, sorry. The bargaining unit represents, I'm so sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, the bargaining unit are the employees that we represent that are represented by our contract, right? So they are represented by our labor union, and our contract protects them in work. And we do that through collective bargaining, right? So as a group of collective workers, we work together to negotiate with our employer, which is the University of Illinois, in order to, hopefully in good faith, to find or to come to terms on like a good agreement that works for us. And that is the contract, right? The agreement between the employees and the employer. So those are some terms to understand so that we're all on the same page, and that we don't throw out any terms or acronyms that no one else understands, because unions like to do that sometimes. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we're just going to do a really brief primer on U.S. labor movement history to kind of set the tone of why specifically a solidarity perspective is so important in this moment. And that is because the labor movement has not been perfect, right? And labor movement itself has been utilized as a way to divide along race in our country, and to prevent collective organizing power. So Leslie's going to do a really brief primer.
Now this I should know because I'm a historian. Cool. So these are just a few important events that have happened throughout history that have really shaped the labor movement, right? And it's really important to remember these. So 1675, a Virginia plantation owner Nathaniel Bacon raised an army of African and European servants due to disagreements among elites on indigenous policies that were in place at that time. So we can see how different groups of people came together and did this. 1677, servants united and turned Bacon's rebellion into a civil war against the plantation system. Very important. And then the king intervenes in the rebellion. And in 1705, the Virginia slave codes are enshrined, and there exists this black-white divide, which has shaped a lot of U.S. policy and history, obviously. Other groups. So we also have the Chinese Exclusion Act, again, not a very nice part of our history, but very important to remember. In 1869, the Knights of Labor were formed, which included black people and women, but excluded Chinese workers. 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act is passed, obviously hindering Chinese workers severely. 1885, mass Chinese expulsions occur in the U.S. West, many led by KOL. And in 1886, the American Federation of Labor was formed, excluded Asian, black, women, and unskilled workers. So we can see how there's intersections between race and class and gender that have sometimes been used against workers, but nevertheless, we have persisted. Cool. Traditionalist unions. Many early trade unions accepted racial, ethnic, and gender divisions of the workforce. The National Labor Union, for example, the Knights of Labor, again, anti-Chinese, very in their face about that, and the American Federation of Labor and Congress traditionalist views. These views harmed international workers and workers of color, but they also harmed U.S. domestic and white workers. Again, these class and racial divides just make the labor movement more difficult for everyone. Alternatives to traditionalist unions. There are leftist unions, right, aka social justice or class struggle unions. These are more democratic and better organized. They are more pro-labor contracts. An example of that would be International Workers of the World, formed in 1905, which welcomed all workers across gender, nationality, race, and ethnicity. They placed an emphasis on class struggle and opposed the Chinese Exclusion Act. Very radical at the time.
Okay, our next session is going into specifically the importance of immigrant workers in the labor movement. Moving in, historically, we can't cover everything in our amount of time. I mean, that could be an entire semester in itself. But we'll do kind of some brief examples of how important immigrant workers have been to the labor movement and to economic stability in the United States, generally speaking. And specifically why it's so important to us as the Graduate Employees Organization that we focus on international non-citizen graduate workers in this moment. And that's because a lot of folks in graduate GEO agreeing as well is that the idea that immigrant workers really are the movement's future. And that is because, first of all, immigrants and non-citizen workers tend to be in the most precarious labor situations. Low-wage workers are disproportionately people of color, female, and immigrants. And immigration status is often weaponized against these employees. And they face much greater risk at work, often in more unsafe labor conditions, and also higher rates of wage theft. And a lot of this gets amplified because folks are immigrants, and that status is taken advantage of, and especially for folks who are non-citizens, that there's a real lack of enforcement of workplace protection laws for them, and so that amplifies their precarity. And so work becomes particularly what we call degraded work, which means really particularly precarious work for those who are low-wage, poor working condition employees who tend to be immigrants and non-citizens. But despite that, immigrants are really what fosters growth in this country, and I think we all know that, right? And by 2040, it's projected that any growth in the United States will be predominantly from immigration. And so it's really important that we focus on the disparate ways that immigrants experience the workplace. but also that they are the backbone of our economic growth in this country as well. They make up 18% of the workforce, but they really contribute to a broad range of sectors, right? I think we talk a lot about how immigrants are in the low-wage labor work, but also immigrants are most likely to secure patents and tend to drive our high-tech industry as well. And to start businesses. So entrepreneurship in the United States is significantly driven by immigrants. And that's a reason why a lot of cities, historically, in the past couple decades or so, have actually used immigration as an economic development tool. Focusing on immigrants is particularly important for us as GEO. And especially because it is local. So Champaign County itself, we have almost 27,000 folks who live here who are foreign-born. A lot of them, of course, are students and graduate workers, but of course people who have come here to immigrate for prosperity or are asylum or refugee seekers. And immigrants have really played a crucial role, not only in providing economic growth in our country and wonderful diversity in our country, but also they have played a defining role in winning strong labor gains. So actually putting the work into winning labor protections. And in the United States, because specifically immigrants, especially those who are undocumented, have historically, and even to this day, not necessarily had as much access to unions as maybe citizens do. A lot of that work gets done in worker centers. Worker centers are often immigrant-led, and they are organizational labor organizations who specifically focus on very low-wage work and the precarity that exists there. And they've been really instrumental in fighting for better wages, for enforcing wage theft laws, winning paid leave policies, and securing protections for immigrant workers. And some examples here of the way that worker centers have won actual labor gains and in a way, like in policy. We can think to Arise Chicago. They won sick days and minimum wage ordinances in Cook County in 2016, but they also helped to create the Chicago Office of Labor Standards. So we can think of the ways that we are winning labor gains for everyone through the work, the organized collective effort of immigrant workers in our country. We can also think to the coalition of Immokalee workers. So they were able to increase the amount of pay they were getting by making sure that Yum Brands, which is an owner of Taco Bell, was paying fair wages to suppliers of tomatoes. And so those extra penny per pound went directly to farm workers. So again, another effort in order to increase the wage stability of immigrant labor in the United States, but of course, raise the standard, generally speaking, for everyone here who works. And then, of course, the Domestic Workers United, which is a Black-led, immigrant-led worker center in New York that focuses on domestic work. And they were able to win the passage of the Domestic Workers Bill of Rights, I think in 2010. So these are really tangible ways that worker centers have changed the worker conditions in the United States. And I'll pass over to Lizzie to talk specifically about El Milagro of the Dia workers, which was supported by Arise.
Awesome. So yeah, we have this really interesting case here with El Milagro of Dia workers. While they're not a union, they have won several major victories through NLRB with support from Arise Chicago. So there were many pre-existing issues, but by 2020, the pandemic had exacerbated many of those issues, making them worse. So there was a lack of yearly evaluations, which led to an inability to get promotions or fair wage increases. There was also a lack of sick days without proof, prescriptions or doctor's notes, which again, thinking about the pandemic, that really put workers' health at risk, right? And unfair punishment for non-compliance. They were actively, punished for this stuff. In 2021, the workers organized a small lockout. However, they were locked out from re-entering the building they held a vigil for 5 coworkers who had died due to COVID-19. So again, these issues heavily impacted El Milagro workers. Yeah. In April 11th of 2022, they were able to win a wage increase totaling $1.3 million, which is a huge victory. They established anti-sexual harassment training for managers, again, very important, especially for female workers. And air conditioning in the lunchroom, which is amazing, right? Let's see. Unfortunately, the company did use intimidation, and Emma touched up on that a little bit, you know, how immigrant status has been used and held over workers' heads as an intimidation tactic, which definitely occurred here. There was also a lot of surveillance of workers. Workers reported seeing like trucks outside of the company kind of watching them. There was also armed paid security guards. And unfortunately to this day, workers feel like the company is still not really listening to them or addressing the issues that they face. Now I kind of want to shift a little bit and talk about leaders in the labor movement. So Emma Tenayuca is a very important woman union leader. She joined the League of United Latin American Citizens, also called LULAC, an international ladies garment workers union, but unfortunately she left both due to the exclusion of Mexican workers. She did join some important strikes, such as the HW Fink Cigar Company strike and the Beacon Shelter strike. She was kicked out of the Beacon Shelter strike for being communist, and she continued to support the efforts even though she was kicked out of that. Another important woman is Luisa Capetillo. She was an anarchist, a feminist, and a labor organizer in Puerto Rico. And she was hired as a leader in the tobacco field, so she would read to other field workers. And reading became a form of organizing workers, which culminated in various workers' strikes through the 21st century. So this is a different organizing tactic that I haven't seen that common, right, reading to your fellow co-workers. And she was a prominent leader in the Puerto Rican suffragette movement as well. So these are just examples of leaders in the labor movement and how they were able to organize their fellow workers.
And specifically Latinx labor leaders, which Latinx labor leaders have been predominantly important in our country. And we want to point here, because we've talked about the ways that unions have not necessarily been the most welcoming environment to immigrants, historically speaking, to say that that sentiment has certainly shifted. Even though many early trade unions accepted those divisions that we talked about, specifically on racial, ethnic, and gender divides, and they lingered, into the mid and late 20th century. But in recent years, those views have certainly modernized, and that unions have been a place of progressive movement around immigration and around immigration policy specifically, and about the ways that we can support immigrant workers in the U.S. And that's been through, opening opportunities in unions themselves, but also in building connections with worker centers. So it's not uncommon for unions to support worker centers in order to uplift the labor movement. But of course, unions still struggle to lead the way with organizing immigrant workers because there are significant barriers to engaging precarious workers, generally speaking. And something that we focus on a lot in GEO, which we'll talk about in a second, we make a core aspect of our organizing, especially because 56% of our bargaining unit is international and non-citizen. So like I mentioned, there are barriers. Those tend to be language barriers, but also that there's a significant amount of intimidation that happens with international or immigrant and non-citizen workers, where, like we mentioned, immigration status has been used against them in order to attempt to prevent them from organizing collectively. But we have, in response to that in the union and the labor movement, generally speaking, tried to move towards more intersectional and solidarity-based labor movement strategy. And so in many ways that can look like abandoning a class-only rhetoric to say that class is important, but also that we recognize that there are various identities to a worker that impact their experience on the shop floor or in their workplace. And we've seen huge successes based off of an intersectional or solidarity-based labor movement. We can look to restaurant opportunity centers or ROCs, but also the Fight for 15. Those were labor movement fights that specifically focused on the integration of working immigrants and identifying the specific precarity that immigrant and non-citizen workers in the United States face. And we're seeing that in unions, right? So a shift towards bargaining for common good, so bargaining for things that uplift and help change the status, broadly speaking, but also that we are putting in strategies to win things like time off for migration issues or visa issues and other kinds of protections. And taking this intersectional approach at the bargaining table can be considered a really innovative strategy for union revitalization, right? The unfortunate reality is that for decades now, union participation has declined because of strategic ways that political parties have tried to undercut the power of collective action. And we've seen that be really reflective in our economy, right? You can look at the Great Recession and the rise of the two-tier economy, the loss of middle-income jobs and middle wages, has a lot to do with the way that our industry shifted and the way that our decline in unionism shifted. And as we enter another crisis, another socio-political and economic crisis, this is a moment for us to embrace collective action as laborers and workers. And in order to do that, it requires that we broaden the field, right? That we understand the different challenges that workers have and to have the solidarity-based perspective. And to do that intersectional approach at the bargaining table could really help us to broaden the union power. And what we can win in a contract can have transformative impacts on society, broadly speaking. And we know that unionized workers, right, have stronger wages, have more stability. But when we see that immigrants are enfolded into the unionization sector, that they are also able to sustain earning advantages as well. So there's significant benefits overall. And there are certain things that scholars have shown that can be included in CBAs or contract bargaining agreements that help to specifically support immigrants. So things like no discrimination on account of status, protections for immigrant workers who encounter issues related to their status, so time off to attend any immigration proceedings that they have to go to, a number of other things that are there before. I'm going to keep it moving though, so we have time for conversation. And these provisions or these protections kind of, in the case of, can also expand to include interactions with ICE, which is a particularly important thing for unions to focus on today, and is something that hopefully we are all organizing to respond to. So that can look like employers requiring the involvement of the union in any discussions around status, the union being notified of any of their workers who have who are immigrants or non-citizen, so being notified if they are have been taken by ICE or being impacted currently. And also forbidding an employer to mandate that an employee meet with ICE. These are different ways in this moment that we can think about protecting immigrants. And again, this all comes back to this idea that when we expand access and strength for all workers, especially immigrants, we help to make sure that labor is safer for everyone. And when we talk about, of course, we're GEO, the Graduate Employees Organization. We focus specifically on helping to organize and protect the labor of graduate workers here on campus. And so with 56% of our bargaining unit being international or non-citizen, the conversation around immigration is particularly important. So a significant number of our bargaining unit is international, and they contribute to things like teaching, so if there are any undergrads in the room, it's highly likely that one of your graduate teaching assistants is international or non-citizen. And they also contribute to research and have particularly precarious situations for many of the reasons that I've discussed already, right? The fear of having their status put over their head or becoming a threat, and as well as this, and in this particularly political environment, a significant number of other concerns. Many of our international grad workers start as F1 visa holders, but few of them can actually get a green card. And it's even harder, so that's like, a status issue that a lot of international students face. But it's even harder for international grad workers to file things like grievances about overwork or other workplace issues because they don't want to lose their job. And again, it comes back to this idea of having their status kind of held over them. But we've also had significant, anti-union legislation that's created barriers to uplifting the number of international grad students that join unions. We can think of Janus, right, which reduced unions funding. That was significant, but also anti-immigration policies make individual international students more likely to stay silent in moments of inequality. But we can also think of these moments now in which, since the change of the presidential administration, the number of anti-immigrant rhetoric and also policies in the past have really made international students a lot more scared, and for a lot of really real reasons. And so because of this, because of the importance of immigrants in labor movements in the US, generally speaking, but also because of the number of international students that are a part of our bargaining unit, GEO is really focused on making sure that international students and non-citizen students, graduate workers, feel protected on campus. And so Matthew's going to talk a little bit about what we're fighting for. And crucial to this is also the way that everyone in this room, whether you're in GEO or not, can stand with us in solidarity to make sure that we win a really good contract and to make sure that we win those protections for international graduate workers.
So like Emma said, I am on the bargaining team. And so really quick, one more thing on why unions are important. When we see unions basically in the workplace, the wages go up. Just as an example from GEO, in our most recent win, our last contract was negotiated, or our current contract was negotiated in 2022. With that, we got a 25% raise over 4 years, summer health care, a lot of other stuff. I was not here at that time, so
Impressive.
sorry. But huge wins for workers on this campus that really impact their daily life. 25% more on your wage is huge. Unions today, what we're seeing right now is a huge uptick in unionization efforts around the US, which is really exciting. Unions, like Emma said, are coming together to talk about intersectional issues, and especially immigration, and how to bring more workers in together, how to fight back against ICE raids in workplaces and in communities, and make sure that working conditions are safe and equitable for all workers. So what GEO is doing right now, and I am so sorry if anybody came here wanting to learn more about what's going to actually be in our proposed contract, I cannot share that right now because we don't want the university to know what we're about to propose on April 6th. But after April 6th, come chat with us. We would love to talk to you. Then the university knows the whole proposal. We can talk about it. But we are working under these bargaining pillars. Overall, what we're fighting for is workers' dignity. The dignity of PAs, RAs, PJs, GAs on this campus. And we've broken that down into 3 big areas. We are fighting for more than just financial gains, we are fighting so that grad workers on this campus have financial health and financial well-being. To make sure that we're not just getting by, but that we're actually, able to save a little bit of money. Have a decent life. We are fighting for more protections, whether that's protections in the workplace or protections from federal actions that are happening. We're also fighting for respect. All of our grad workers deserve the respect of their bosses, of the university administration. And sometimes we don't always feel that we're getting that respect. So we want to make sure that we are respected and that we have a way to deal with it if we're feeling disrespected. Now, how do we get the university to agree to our demands? Sometimes the university is swayed by data. Not usually. They don't care. We can come with all of the rational arguments for, yes, we deserve more money because inflation. We should be effectively having a growing wage. But that hasn't really swayed the university in most cases. What really sways them is our community coming together, showing that we care about grad workers and other workers on this campus, and putting pressure on them to do what is right. That can be legal pressure sometimes. That can be member and community testimonials about how they're being negatively impacted by something. This can be public pressure and negative publicity, so publishing articles that are critical of the university, and also undergrads coming out, our community members coming out to our rallies right ahead, right before a bargaining session. We have these big rallies. We try to get as many people there. First of all, no one can tell who's a grad student and who is not at a rally. But number two, showing that our community cares and is fighting for this makes the university realize that, we don't want a bad image. We better take this seriously and give GEO what they want. And the biggest thing, the most famous thing, is the threat of workers withholding their labor going on strike. If we're not doing the things that we're supposedly paid to do, the university grinds to a halt. Grad workers, TAs for example, make up a huge percentage of the teaching hours on this campus. As Emma, I think, said earlier, if you are an undergrad in this room, I guarantee you've had many classes that were taught or graded by a teaching assistant who is a graduate worker. If you work in labs, a ton of the people you're working with are also grad workers. And this is the first time that they're part of our bargaining unit for real. And so that's a very powerful win for GEO. How we win a strong contract is with you. As the fish said, when we are all swimming about, separated, it's easy for us to be picked off one by one. But when we come together and we go against the one enemy, we're pretty powerful. We're a lot bigger. In 2017 to 2018, our union went on strike. Partially because the university wanted to take away our tuition waivers. Tuition waivers are the main reason that pretty much every grad student in this room and on this campus is able to attend the University of Illinois. We won those back with that strike. 2022 to 2023, like I said, we had huge wins. And I also just want to say really quick, grad workers' working conditions, what we're being paid, the safety requirements that we have, those conditions are undergrads' learning conditions. The better our working conditions are, the better the classroom is, the better the labs are, the better the university is, the better research comes out of this place. So the better we're treated, the better the place runs, right? And because we have so many teaching assistants and research assistants who are getting these wages and tuition waivers, it has made higher education more accessible for more people to be here and to contribute to research and learning. We have a few action items for people. Number one, follow us on Instagram. We post a lot of really good stuff. A lot of possums. That's our official mascot. We love them. Come out to our rallies. We will announce every single rally we ever do on our Instagram. When you see that one's coming up, please come out and show your support for us. You can come to GEO Solidarity Committee. One of the really cool things about Solidarity Committee is that it is open to the public. Our union wants to be involved in the other movements happening in this community. And so if your organization that you work with needs some labor union help, come talk to us. We really love getting plugged in. And you can also help us organize things for the labor movement in town. And finally, talk to your coworkers, to your friends, family members, whoever, about joining their union. Even if it's not GEO, the more that the unions around town and around the country are organized, the better for the labor movement entirely. If you know somebody who has a labor union and they're not a member, get them to go sign their card. If they're a grad student on this campus and they're not a member, they can go on our website. We made it really easy. You don't even have to fill out a physical card. And we're also going to be sending out emails with rallies. So if you scan this QR code, you can sign up to be on our Solidarity Action listserv. We send out a lot of information, really good updates on the local labor movement. So yeah, I'll give you all a minute to scan that to see things. Yeah.
If you don't have a smartphone, we also have a sign-up sheet at our table in the foyer.
We also have really cool stickers at the summit table, or at the table out there, so go get a sticker. And yeah, keep in touch with us, and I think we can open the floor to questions at this point.
So if you have a question, feel free to get my attention and I'll get the microphone to you.
You said April 10th is your target date with the university, is that correct?
Sorry, could you?
You said you had not come into negotiation with the university in April. Do you have any, when I think of April, this time of year, I think Mom's Day. You all have moms. And I'm sure every mom of every student wants to know that they're getting the best education possible. I think there's some solidarity for you. If you don't have it, certainly would hope to help that make that happen. The other thing is the Greek community is probably the largest in any public university here. Is there a large percentage of people who were part of the Greek system who are now grad students?
I don't think we collect information on that. I don't know off the top of my head on that. But it's worth us looking into for sure. And can I answer on the moms thing specifically? Because that just brought up a really cool story. SEIU, which is the building and food service workers on this campus, went on strike in fall of 2024. And one thing that happened that really helped them have success in their strike was undergrads came to GEO and were like, how can we help? And we were like, let's ask SEIU what they think would be helpful. And they were like, tell all of the undergrads on the campus why the buildings aren't going to be clean and why food is going to be very slow at the dining halls. Go tell them. And so what the undergrads did is they started printing out flyers, passing them out at all the dorms, to all the students they could find, to pull students over to the union side instead of taking the university's line about how these workers just want to have more money and work less. And one of the action items was also tell your parents what's happening and have your parents call the university, because the university does not like having to take all those calls. So if GEO does come out with those asks in the future, please do have your parents call. We love when that happens.
Yeah, I believe there was a Mother's Day weekend where that action continued. At various SEIU had people at the dorms when mothers were visiting. Because I'm a former SEIU, I remember that. This is the historical, well, not a historical thing, but somebody mentioned domestic workers' bill of rights. So I looked it up, and I knew there was some federal action, but it didn't go ahead. There are that is a success, but it's limited. It's limited to some states and a couple of cities. So I was hoping that maybe that had gone ahead. That makes me think also of the nurses union, which are highly penetrated with, people from other countries. Sort of a lamentable brain drain. But I don't know if anybody has any reaction to those two things. I was hoping we could celebrate that domestic workers' Bill of Rights had been passed federally, but regrettably it hasn't.
The fight continues.
Yeah.
One better after
La luta continua.
Hi, thanks very much. Great presentation. I think maybe 2 points I'd like you guys to share a bit. I think, if I recall correctly, the author of the International Working Men's Association would have argued that international workers don't have any country. Right? So you also would have critiqued workers here as a sort of labor aristocracy in terms of the division in the world. So my question is, to what extent do you connect with graduate workers outside of the US? Right? In non-European countries, for example. The second question, I think maybe we are in a time now where human labor is optional. In fact, being human is negotiable. So how are you guys thinking through the question of AI as a threat to what you do? Thank you.
On the AI question, I cannot go into details on that because I can just say we are thinking about that heavily and thinking about that for our contract, but I don't want to say anything too specific. But we are thinking about it and figuring out how to protect workers, both from having to use AI in ways that they don't want to or being replaced by AI. To your point on talking to graduate workers in especially other countries, we struggle with that, I would say. We try to comment on movements generally happening around the country and around the world. We are in contact with some graduate unions and other unions in the US, but we have not had as much success in building connections abroad, and I think that's a place we could improve for sure.
This isn't related to graduate workers specifically, but I think is an example of like how powerful like connections with international workers, broadly speaking, with GEO, like how powerful it is, and this didn't happen during my time here, so if anyone like Chelsea, if I get this wrong, feel free to correct me. But during Solcom's tenure with Afad, when he was a Solcom co-chair, there was, I think, textile workers striking in Bangladesh, and we were able to write a letter of solidarity for them that positively impacted their fight and helped them get some wins. So there are really concrete ways that we in the US can connect with international workers, and specifically international workers that maybe in the global south or outside of Europe, to kind of enhance and strengthen the labor fight.
Well, I have a concern about how the labor unions bargain with the university. First of all, I'm sure that everyone appreciates the efforts that the labor union protects the workers. But as we know that the university are across the country are mostly facing a shortage of funding cuts due to the federal government. And as the labor union bargain with the university for a higher wage for our research assistant, teaching assistant, and other workers, how can we make sure that it would not lead to more job cuts of assistantship and fellowship of the university, like losing jobs for more people?
So one thing that we did in preparation for bargaining, and I can't speak too much on details about showing our hand in case, somebody is in the room. But we did a financial analysis, an independent financial analysis of the university prior And the university here, at least, showed quite good health. So we don't think that what we're demanding is going to have those adverse effects. But also, even when we propose something, what we propose is not going to look the same as what we win in the end. The university is also going to negotiate with us and say, well, we don't have money for this, and they're going to show us their evidence for that, and that's going to require us to come to agreements on what is possible. So we come with lots of demands, lots of things that we want to improve working conditions, but we do have to come to an agreement with the university eventually. So that hopefully answers the question and is to say, I don't think that this will be a huge problem. And so far the university is looking very healthy. So yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be slightly annoying because I have one thing to add onto that too, which is that I believe definitely in the state of Illinois there is a fight for the state to actually fund public education in the way that they used to. So the funding structure for public education has kind of flip-flopped over time, where now a lot of it comes from private equity instead of state funding. And so there also is a fight currently ongoing to get the state of Illinois to fully fund university system and public education system as they used to. And so I also think that this provides a really valuable opportunity to also leverage this struggle and say, okay, well, if you're saying you don't have the money, which we know they do have the money, then we can say, then we need you to support this struggle in legislation to get the state to fund you. So you can also leverage that for some social justice purposes.
So this isn't really on topic of a lot of the other questions, more just a thing out of curiosity. How come the possum is your guys' mascot? Is there any swearing at that?
We are also a very social union. Our grad workers like to hang out together on a weekly basis at different bars and stuff. And I think one of our stewards had just kind of sketched a possum or something like that. And everybody thought it was so cute that we just kind of adopted it, and now we have a giant crocheted possum in our office. So it's really snowballed over the years into all of our merch is possums, and we have lots of possum stickers and the new designs as of this year that we got out on the table too. So if you like the possum, grab a possum. Alrighty.
Well, it is on my plaque. I also noticed the possum, so I'm going to have to get a sticker out there. But thank you all for coming. Thank you so much to our GEO representatives, Emma, Leslie, and Matthew, for being here today. If you want to give them a round of applause.
Hello, everyone. So, as mentioned, the labor movement has a lot of connections to other movements. Social movements are interconnected, and part of the connection is also to the environmental movement. One of the reasons that we have so much immigration right now is because of climate refugees and the like. All these things are connected. And if you have a pension, or are interested in going to a career that has a pension, or are just interested in getting some of our state's money out of fossil fuels, on Tuesday, coming up, NCCS, Students of Environmental Concerns, and the Climate Safe Pension in Illinois are going to have a panel talking about how we can get our money on the pension system out of fossil fuels. Illinois has a couple $2 billion invested in the fossil fuel industry, which is contributing to a lot of emissions, a lot of pollution, and it doesn't have to be that way. So if you're interested, 12-1, the Channing Murray Foundation, right on the other side of the quad, come out and learn a little bit more.
Thanks for sharing.
Can I take that one clip?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to end by coming back to that question of solidarity. In negotiation, sometimes the intersectional or solidarity acts that we have at the table are sometimes the hardest to win. And so we're entering this moment trying to find, to build the power to win protections for international and non-citizen students, but also for our queer and trans students. And so when this campaign begins, we really hope that you'll join us in solidarity to help us win that. Because it's not just worker power, but it is solidarity power. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, and we've got 3 more weeks of Friday Forum Conversation Café, so we hope that you'll join us and the University YMCA for those talks. Next week specifically, we have Nick Sansoni from Public Citizen and talking about people versus power, so litigation as a strategy for social and economic justice. So join us next week, same time, same place, and have a good week.